Hi, my name is Steven Sorenchi. So I was discussing American interpreters that go to interpret in another country. A lot of times there's a lot of mistakes that get made when that happens. My advice to them is what I'll be discussing in this video. So 15 years ago, I went to Europe to work as an interpreter. The person themselves was an American deaf person, and they knew American Sign Language. So I did my best to interpret in American Sign Language. So we went together. We saw this history. We saw the people walking around, and I would do my best to interpret for them. So I was going along doing my thing. One person said, um, "You're interpreting. Wow, it's great. How are you signing about that? What's the sign for it?" And if in the future a person shows up, how do you get in touch with a interpreting agency? I kept telling them, "Oh, I don't know. I mean, I really don't know how you would call down an interpreter." And I felt guilty about that. But I said, we're both Americans. I really just don't know. I'm not in my country. And so 15 years ago, that happened. So I was sitting there and I was thinking, and I was having all these different experiences while I was traveling and interpreting. And I realized that I was wrong because I should know those things. If I want to go to another country and start working there as an interpreter, I should know the rules and customs of that country. So I grabbed the opportunity to go to another country. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, traveling, looking around, seeing the sights, and I understood that you need to respect those countries. When you go to another country to interpret, that country, their specific needs are sometimes special. And you have to follow their interpreting rules. So I had to analyze my actions and try to adjust myself to match the country's interpreting laws. So their rules, their customs, I had to try and analyze that, analyze myself, and try to figure out the best way to fit in with that. So the first topic I want to analyze is egocentrism. So people assume my culture and I assume their culture, and we assume it's the same. And really, it's like each culture is very different. People think, well, like, okay, yeah, sure, it's different. Maybe uh, their family and home and their private life is different. Okay, sure, but our work is the same. But that's not true. So their work, their culture, their expectations are all very different in each place. So when you go to another country, you have to think about your work and if you're making the right decisions. And because your professional and home life are different, sure, but you need to be careful when analyzing your work life. So when you're traveling to another country, their work culture is a lot of times very different. So, for example, maybe the way that they dress are different. Americans tend to be dark clothes, and in other countries that's not always necessarily the case. In other countries, they expect to always, dress with a suit and tie, or some countries don't expect that. Some of them are saying, short sleeves are okay. America always tends to do simultaneous interpreting, but in other countries, that's not necessarily the case. A lot of times, they tend to do consecutive interpreting. You listen and then you interpret. Uh, you also have to know the boundaries of each job. So you have to try and be friendly with them. You be flexible with them. But in other countries, that's not necessarily the case. You draw a strict line and you never cross that line in terms of professionalism, and you always just strictly stay as an interpreter. It really does depend on the country and their sort of customs and rules. So in America, we tend to think of stakeholders, and you advise deaf people, hearing people, uh, and so that's what I call stakeholders. But you have to add those other countries and their interpreting rules as well, and it's very different. So maybe I was born in a country where there's a limited number of interpreters that are available, and I'm the only example for them as an American interpreter. So when people look at me, they say, "That's an interpreter." And so they'll set up and try to follow my job, but they should know their expectations and their tendencies and their rules in their country. It's not us transporting our rules and customs over there. It's their customs that we should be adjusting to. So there's a lot of countries who have good interpreting setups already, and so that means they already have their rules and setups, their rules and customs established, and you have to try and do your best to follow those, because that's respect and support for their job. So when you're interpreting in another country, it's important to respect their sign words as well. So for example, when you go to interpret in a place, um, maybe they have some signs that deaf people in the area have already been using. Me as an American interpreter, if I go in there and I go ahead and I ignore stuff or I fingerspell or create new signs, it's kind of being ignorant of their language. If they have some signs, I should go ahead and do my best to try and use those. Or maybe if I'm doing my best to do some research and I can't find signs, okay, that's fine. But understand you can try to understand what words they're meaning and try to ask them about them, and then try to convert that into ASL. So just try to do your best to understand their language. Don't just ignore it and then do your best to fingerspell it or whatever. Okay, so if you're traveling to another country and they have their own special culture, their identity, their language, as an interpreting job, it's definitely different. So when you're trying to learn all these different things, um, you have to try and get in touch with the deaf people there, interpreting community there. Maybe you go to another country and it's just temporary, 2 days, 3 days, or maybe you're going on a cruise and you're coming back. That's fine, but get in touch with just temporary. Try to talk with someone. Uh, it just it doesn't have to be anything crazy complicated. So maybe for like a college job, you're going to another country and you're staying there for a month, 2 months, 3 months. And it's extended period of time, then you definitely have to get in touch with someone and try to meet with them one-on-one or an interpreter, a deaf person. Try to discuss, get deep into the science for different things and really try to understand the language. Try to understand their rules, their customs, their traditions, uh, because it can be a lot, but we have to respect their customs and try to also support them financially as well. So an interpreter, you have to support all these different communities. You can't just say, "Oh, this is all mine." You have to try and support every place that you visit. So the CDC said you must respect other interpreters, other people. You have to show some respect for them. How do you show respect? One thing that's important is money and trying to share your interpreting gains with them. So once you try to get an understanding of their culture and their language by reaching out to people, their roles and rules and interpret as an interpreter, you can pay. Or what's even better is as an interpreter, you can try to work together. If that country knows ASL and that interpreter knows ASL, you can work together. Try to be equal partners and work together to teach each other. Whether it's hearing or deaf, we can work together. So whether it's a college student or American transplant or um, you can't just go to other countries and take advantage of it. Try to get to know the people, the deaf people their community. As an interpreter, um, we can't just try to take from them. We have to try and support them the best way that we can. So when you work in another country, you have to be careful when you're analyzing and trying to figure out how to best work in that country. So the first thing I recommend is that you reach out to the WFD um, or the WASLEI. So those are sign language interpreting organizations, and they have a whole list of resources for deaf groups, interpreters that you can go ahead and look through and figure out who to contact. So local deaf and local interpreters, you have to try and grab the opportunity to contact them and get their information, their language, their culture, their interpreting customs. Um, Try to get in touch with someone so that you can have that explained to you. So if you, an interpreter, and a local interpreter can work together, that's always the best. Sometimes it doesn't work out, but if you do know ASL and you can figure out the best way to work together with a local interpreter, that's always really good. Sometimes an agency or university, they're willing to uh, support a community with you. Um, if they tell you no, don't just accept that. Try to fight with them until you can work together with someone from the local area. So when you go to another country, um, don't just say, "Oh, it's my culture," or "It's I'm American." Try to go beyond that and really reach out to the deaf people of that area and that interpreting community. Uh, that way, you can adopt some of their culture, and you can have a better understanding of like their rules and the customs as well. If in another country a person comes up to you and said, "Hey, how do I contact an interpreter or agency? Do you have any information on that?" You have to be ready to have some information to pull out and give to them. It's really important that you're representing that community, and it's important to be able to do that. So once you accept an interpreting job, you have to really try to work with them to hire people from the local interpreting community. Hearing interpreters or deaf interpreters, both of them work. So you can try to stop different organizations from preventing you from doing that. Try to do your best to support that local deaf community and interpreting community by having them work with you and giving them jobs. As an interpreter, maybe you don't want to give up your money. You're going to another area with an interpreter. You want to meet up. You want to work together as an interpreter. Maybe if other organizations won't pay, maybe you could split some of the money that you're getting paid to support them. So when you go to another country, you should know that the deaf culture there and um, the deaf people in the area, maybe they don't need an interpreter. So if you know a list of interpreters and a deaf person wants one, you can say I can interpret, or you can um, offer them to join deaf businesses or deaf classes. Um, you have to know that list of options for any deaf person that approaches you. As an interpreter, please go to if you go to like an island and get in touch with people there, or maybe they have like American universities in Europe that you're learning from. That's great, but understand that if you think it's nothing and you're just taking advantage of the situation, you just can't do that. As an American, when you're going to work, you have to before think about and plan for the best way to interpret beforehand. If you think it's nothing and you think like, oh, I don't have to do any planning or organization, you will definitely make mistakes and mess up that job. So try to plan ahead, and you will benefit. Plus, the people in the area, in the local deaf community, will also benefit as well. Okay, that's gonna do it.